Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the Daily Commute. My name is Dan, and I want to talk today about the nature of politics in 2021, and the nature of politics in general, I suppose. And before you get turned off and you shut this off, just know I'm not making this a rant about my own personal political views or anything like that, or coming down on people for theirs. Granted, I have my political positions, I have my stances that I hold as valuable and important to me, and I know I disagree with a lot of people. I know a lot of people disagree with me. It's more about the nature of politics, and it's more about the way we interact with one another. So, for instance, there's a group on Locals that I'm part of that it's a political focused group, and for the most part, most people in there seem to be of a single political persuasion. There are a few people in there who are on the opposite side, and then there's people like me who kind of are more like in the middle, I guess you could say. I don't really like the left or right spectrum when it comes to politics, because I think it really depends on what aspect of not even what aspect of politics you're talking about, but like you can use the left-right spectrum adequately for a bunch of different subjects. So as far as like as far as politically, people would say left or right and think of Republicans and Democrats in this country. Really, I think of it more as like the political compass. I'm sure some of you have seen it. If you haven't taken the test already, it's an interesting one. I think it's a much better way of measuring somebody's political rankings, because it's not just left and right. It's on a grid, and so you figure out, are you more economically left or economically right, and socially, are you more authoritarian or libertarian? And it puts you in an axis where you can find out, okay, I tend to lean more this way than this way. So for instance, I did the political compass test again a couple of months ago just to see where I was, because I haven't done it in a while. And I used to be, back in 2015 when I first took the test, I was very much on the left libertarian side of things, whereas now I'm a bit more on the right libertarian side of things. And I think that's partially just from getting a bit older, also partially from diving a bit more into my own political philosophy and ideas about how things should be done, how things should work. And I think also part of that is a shift in our political apparatus as a whole in this country, in America right now. So, like I said, I don't really care for the left-right spectrum, but I understand why people use it. It simplifies things. It makes it easy for normal people to understand what a general understanding of where people are. The problem comes when you have people who manipulate that spectrum, and you make everything that's to the right of like far left socialism being far right or alt-right or whatever they want to call it these days. That's the problem. That's problematic, and that goes back to the shifting of the Overton window, which is, I guess, another discussion for another time. But nonetheless, I think that I really want to gear this more towards people who tend to be what I would refer to as normies, who are new to being politically active, because 2020 was a very divisive political season in America. It was a very divisive time because Donald Trump was the president, whether you like the man or not. He said a lot of stuff. He said a lot of bad stuff. He said some good stuff. He said, he did a lot of things that some people truly feel were abhorrent. He did some things that I think were genuinely good. Overall, I would say he was probably an average to mediocre president, but towards the end there, his peace deals he was helping to broker and foster, or maybe it was more just his administration, I suppose, not necessarily. The president's never really the one who's handling a lot of these things. It tends to be the ambassadors and the diplomats who really kind of are at the spearhead of a lot of these deals. But the peace deals with Israel and other Middle Eastern countries, there's a peace deal between them and I believe Saudi Arabia and Sudan and I think Yemen or Oman, I can't remember which one. A bunch of different places over there. It helped foster a peace deal between Serbia and Kosovo, which for anyone who lived through the conflict in the 90s, that's a huge deal. I know a lot of young people who didn't understand like why I thought that was a big deal. But I remember growing up in the early '90s, and then I think it was in '96 is when NATO got involved over there because of the ethnic cleansing that was going on. There was just a lot to it, and so I was really happy to see America start to take a more active role in helping to broker and foster peace in the Middle East and around the world. And I think that's one of those things where, if whether you like the man or not, you can still agree, like, hey, that's a good thing. It's a good thing that people are going to stop killing each other. It's a good thing that people are going to start, like, getting along and normalizing relations. Like this country that committed a war crime and genocide against this other people group are now recognizing them as a country and starting to do business and trade with them and to offer support back and forth. That's a great thing. But, he did a lot of things I didn't like. I was not a fan of the trade war with China. Though it seems like maybe it was working. I don't really know. But I think that, generally speaking, trade wars are not a good way to do foreign policy and foreign trade. But nonetheless, this isn't a discussion on Donald Trump. This is just about the politics thing. So the point I bring him up is that he was very divisive. There were a lot of people who really hated the man and who were politically activated because they wanted to get the orange man out of office. And then there's a lot of people who really did like him, who wanted him to stay in and who came out to vote for the first time because they liked his policies and because they liked the way he shook things up in Washington and he shook things up in the media. And then honestly, there were people like myself who really couldn't stand him in 2016, and then 2020 recognized, okay, maybe he did some good stuff along the way. So I think the point of it is more like, this guy really got people out to vote. So you have all these new people, millions of new voters who came out, who are online talking politics for the first time, a lot of them shooting their mouth off about stuff they don't understand, which, everyone's entitled to have their opinions. They're entitled to share those opinions. We have freedom of speech for a reason. The problem, and how I see it, is in a lot of ways it's like when Facebook became public. It's when the normal people started showing up on Facebook. So I remember starting out on Facebook back in, I think it was 2005. Back then it was invitation only to college students, so you had to have a college email account in order to be able to sign up for Facebook. And it was just you with your friends on there, and we would all kind of hang out and talk together. And you could share pictures with one another, make plans. It was a fun way to interact. And then around 2008 or 2009, it opened up to the general public, and so you ended up having all of these normal people show up and kind of take over the platform, which, good or bad, I was not a huge fan of it. I preferred it back when it was, more of a closed off group. I think that's why I enjoy locals so much. I've been on a couple of locals groups, and in a lot of ways it does remind me of old school Facebook, I think, or even old school MySpace. I wasn't a huge MySpace fan, but I was on there for a little while. But with old school Facebook, it was just a few people that you knew in real life, and while I don't know the people on locals in real life, it's a small group of people that you become familiar with, that you become friends with, that you talk to online, and you kind of get to know each other. And it's not this broad, massive, it's not this huge user base with billions or millions of people that you don't know, that you'll never know, that there's no consequences if you smart off to, because we're in this small group together, and you make acquaintances and friends with people on there, and you're not going to shoot your mouth off. Well, hopefully not. I mean, this is going to come back later on, but just like on Facebook, it's like you were friends with these people in real life. You knew them. Like if you weren't friends with them, you weren't going to be friends with them on Facebook. It's not like how it is now, where people add all these people on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat and all these different platforms, where you don't know them, they're just your followers, Followers weren't a thing back then. And honestly, I think it was a better way to do things. Anyways, I digress. 2020 activated millions and millions of people who got politically active for the first time, and especially when you've had years and years, not even just during the Trump presidency, but during the Obama years, and I would say even back into the Bush years, of media manipulation, of pushing people to be more and more polarized. And now we end up with a situation where you have all these people who are just getting into politics for the first time, who don't really understand how things work. They don't understand how American government works. They don't understand how they don't understand the consequences of a lot of the policies and the decisions that they may be advocating for. And then you've got people like me. I'm not saying I'm all that great, but I've been politically active since 2006. I started getting more politically active in college. I actually went to school. I got my bachelor's degree from Arizona State University, focused on political science and religious studies. I was going to go into politics for a while, and then I decided not to, because I care about my soul and my sanity, and I think that politics eats away at both of those. But I think that what we are seeing now, and hopefully it'll normalize back out, but I'm not entirely convinced it will, is you've got all these people who are getting politically active for the first time, and they're going out and they're using their social media platforms, and they're using even their platforms in real life to some extent, I would assume, to share their views and their opinions on things. But they're doing so in a way that's really hurtful to a lot of people. And now, before anyone jumps to conclusions, you can say what you want. You can have your opinions. You can say it however you want. And there are, as much as cancel culture is a thing, and it's a bad thing, and I think it needs to go away and it needs to stop forever, there are legitimate consequences. And that's how it's always been. Like, if you go up to somebody and you start screaming in their face and you spit on them and you threaten them, don't be surprised when they punch you in the face. Or don't be surprised when the police show up and they escort you away. These are things that we take for granted in real life. And then when we get online, we think there's no consequences. I'm not saying that people should be, getting doxxed. I'm not saying people should be getting swatted. I'm not saying that people should be losing their jobs because of the way that they treat one another. But I'm talking more on the level of common decency. I was raised by, I had my mom. My dad passed away when I was a kid. And my mom remarried later on, but for my early years, my more formative years, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and they were from a very different time. They were born in the 1930s, and so I grew up with a lot of these values that were much more prominent in the mid-20th century. Now, not a perfect time, to be sure, but men were expected to be gentlemen, and ladies were expected to be ladies, and there were certain expectations. You give up your seat for a lady. You hold the door for other people. It was hold a door for a lady, but I would say hold the door for everybody. Just common courtesy. And I think that maybe that's a good way to put it. It's just common courtesy, being kind and being respectful to people. You can disagree with them, but that seems to be missing more and more. And I think that is a big part of the problem that I'm seeing in society now. Is there's just a lack of decency amongst a lot of different people online. So you see people coming out sharing their views on Donald Trump, sharing their views on the vaccines, sharing their views on wearing masks in public, and those are obviously the big things that people have been talking about over the last year or so. But other things too, like immigration policy, foreign interventionism, different things like that, like things that should be discussed, things that people should have an opinion on, things that people should be aware of what their opinions are and why they hold those opinions. But what we're seeing is people are just kind of absorbing what the media tells them. They're absorbing what they're reading online, and typically it's more or less headlines at this point. It's not really reading the articles, and part of that is because people are lazy, and part of that is because the media has embraced clickbait headlines. because it gets clicks, it gets views, it generates ad revenue for them. And so you end up with a headline that is kind of inflammatory, that insinuates one thing, and then once you actually read the article, you're like, oh, that's a little bit different than what the headline was saying. And then if you really want the full story, you have to like really put in a little bit more effort and follow the little link rabbit hole, because very few places are actually doing independent journalism anymore. Most of them are just republishing each other's work. And so you end up having to go down the rabbit hole to find the original article that has a link in it somewhere to the press release or to the video or to whatever, so you can see it for yourself. And that's more work than most people are going to put into it. But I think a bigger issue than people just kind of being lazy and not doing what they need to do in order to hold themselves accountable, in order to hold the media accountable, and to hold celebrities accountable, is if you're going to just take what you've been told as gospel and you're going to just take that and run with it, at least do it in a nicer way. Have that level of common decency. And I feel like that's really something that we have been losing more and more over the years, to the point now where people are online screaming at each other, and people in real life are screaming at each other. Like how many videos have you seen in the last year and a half now of people at Costco or people at restaurants getting screamed at for not wearing a mask? And now there are videos coming out of people getting screamed at for wearing masks. And I'm like, if you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. I don't care. Like, I personally think that the mask mandates are stupid, because there's only a handful of masks that actually work, and most people aren't using them. And when they do use them, they're not using them properly. So I, for one, am like, okay, well, I'm not going to get those fancy masks, and I'm not wearing them the right way anyways, because nobody else is either, and I don't take it that seriously. I know maybe I should, but, for me, it's a calculated risk. Like, I'm not going to fuss with somebody over it. Like, if somebody wants to wear a mask to feel more comfortable, cool. Like, I went to the gas station this morning, and there was a lady there wearing 2 masks, and I'm like, cool. If that makes you feel comfortable, then wear 2 masks. I think that, one, people need to stop. They need to chill out, calm down. I think all of society needs to calm down right now, especially in America. I brought up that conservative group that I was talking about earlier, and I saw a post from a guy. I'm not sure where he's from, based on the context of what he wrote. Doesn't sound like he's from America, but discussing these political issues with these other conservative folk and getting yelled at and getting sworn at, which is not normal for that group, because there's not really a lot of swearing. It's actually frowned upon in the group, because he holds a negative view of Donald Trump. And I'm like, there's a lot of people who hold negative views of Donald Trump. I didn't like the man for the longest time. I still don't like everything he did. I don't think he was a perfect president. I think he was better than Barack Obama was. I campaigned for Obama back in 2008 and was really gung-ho about him, because I was tired of 8 years of George W. Bush and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and all these other things. And then, he comes into office and starts drone bombing, weddings in the Middle East and American citizens in Yemen, and doing all indefinite detentions. And, it was as much as people on the left tend to scream about Donald Trump being a war criminal, I think the last several presidents have been war criminals, Barack Obama definitely was. George W. Bush definitely was. The use of white phosphorus in Iraq, while white phosphorus is not technically a chemical agent, it's close enough that it should not have been used. Donald Rumsfeld, I felt like, granted he's passed away now, doesn't mean I have to like the guy. His use of enhanced interrogation torture techniques were not okay at all. And I don't know, I'm kind of getting on a tangent now, but I think that my biggest issue right now, and this is part of why I got so burned out on politics, because as I said, I was finishing up my degree, and this was in 2016. I graduated in 2017, and so getting your degree in political science in the height of, at the time, probably the most divisive presidential election in history. I don't know if I should say history. We've had a lot of divisive presidents. I'm pretty sure that Lincoln getting elected was probably pretty rough too. But between Clinton and Trump and oh my gosh, just the last 2 elections have just been a nightmare. But it really burned me out. it really burned me out on politics because people are so angry and so mean to each other, and we are not being decent human beings to one another when we behave this way. And I feel like that's the only way that we're really going to be able to change this stuff. Now, yeah, there's a lot that the government's doing that's bad. There's a lot that the media is doing that's bad. There's a lot that cultural institutions like education systems and entertainment that are real bad, and we should definitely resist those things and stand up to those things. Um, but I think the first step of what we need to do is to acknowledge the humanity of one another and acknowledge that we all have valid points of view. Well, maybe not all. There are some pretty fringe ideas out there that I don't think really we should tolerate that much. Anyway, but recognizing like we're all people. Like, you know, like I've told you guys before, I'm a Christian. I'm a believer, so I believe that we're all inherently created with value because we're created in the image and likeness of God, and so we should be treating each other as such. And I suppose if you don't believe that, then you probably don't see a value in other people. But I do. I think it's important that we treat each other well, that we love one another as we would like them to love us, that we would like them to treat us the way that we would treat them. I kind of got that backwards. But anyway, I don't think there's really much more to say to it about that. Anyway, so if you want to follow me, again, it's over at rebornjumpman.com. I'll have this posted there. I've got some other things in the work as well that I think will be good, entertaining. If you want to reach out to me, you can reach out to me there, or you can find me on Twitter at rebornjumpman, on Minds at retropunk, and on Odyssey at rebornjumpman. All right, take care, everyone.